Good morning, Flyers. It's our last week before Christmas break or winter break, and I hope you're as excited as I am to be able to go home and spend that time with your families and get all refreshed and rested and ready to come back in 2025. So we're going to have a new year when we get back. But until then, we're still at school and we're still going to be learning about giving. This is a great time to talk about it. And I've got a wonderful book today that really focuses on the fact that giving is better than receiving. So it's a great story. It's called The Quiltmaker's Gift. It's got a lot of really detailed pictures. I'm probably not going to be able to show you as well as I'd like to, but this is the kind of book you can really pore over and find something new in every picture when you look at it. It's written by Jeff Brumbeau, and the beautiful illustrations are by Gail DeMarkin. Really pretty. It's kind of a fairy tale story. And you know, a fairy tale is a fantasy. This one also kind of has a message to it, so let's listen and enjoy. There was once a quilt maker who kept a house in the blue misty mountains up high. Even the oldest great-grandmother could not recall a time when she was not up there, sewing away day after day. Here and there, and wherever the sun warmed the earth, it was said she made the prettiest quilts anyone had ever seen. The blues seemed to come from the deepest part of the ocean, the whites from the northernmost snows, the greens and purples from the abundant wildflowers, the reds, oranges, and pinks from the most wonderful sunsets. If you have a quilt at home, and I'm just going to show you on the back, quilt is a special blanket that someone makes, usually out of squares of material that form a pattern. Some said there was magic in her fingers. Some whispered that her needles and cloth were gifts of the bewitched. And still others said the quilts really fell to earth from the shoulders of passing angels. Many people climbed her mountain, pockets bursting with gold, hoping to buy one of the wonderful quilts, but the woman would not sell them. "I give my quilts to those who are poor or homeless," she said to those who knocked on her door. "They are not for the rich." Okay, so she's got a real talent making these beautiful quilts, and people want to give her a lot of money for that, but she does not take that money. She says, "I want to give these to the homeless or the poor." That's a wonderful thing. On the darkest and coldest nights, the woman would make her way down the mountain to the town below. There she would wander the cobblestone streets until she came upon someone sleeping outside in the chill. She would then take a newly finished quilt from her bag, wrap it around their shivering shoulders, tuck them in tight, and tiptoe away. Then the very next morning, with a steaming cup of blackberry tea, she would begin a new quilt. Oh, you can see some pictures of her bringing the quilt to people cold on the street with no one to warm them. Nobody to help them get warm except her. What a wonderful gift she gives. Now at this time, there also lived a very powerful and greedy king who liked nothing better than to receive presents. The hundreds of thousands of beautiful gifts he got for Christmas and his birthday were never enough. So a law passed that the king would celebrate his birthday twice a year. When that still wasn't enough, he ordered his soldiers to search the kingdom for those people who had not yet given him a gift. Over the years, the king had come to own almost all of the prettiest things in the world. Throughout the castle, from top to bottom, in drawers and in shelves and boxes and trunks and closets and sacks, all of the king's countless things were stashed. Wow, it's not even enough to have birthday presents once a year. He has a law that he has his birthday twice a year because he wants so many things. Now, when you look at this picture, I want you to imagine actually having this many things. And would you really be able to take the time to enjoy them? Things that shimmered and glittered and glowed, things whimsical and practical, mysterious and magical, so many, many things that the king kept a list of all the things that he owned. Oh my goodness. So many things for one person. I don't know if he actually has time to enjoy those, but he keeps a list of them. And yet, with all these marvelous treasures to enjoy, the king never smiled. He was not happy at all. Somewhere there must be one beautiful thing that will finally make me happy, he was often heard to say, and I will have it. One day a soldier rushed into the palace with news about a magical quilt maker who lived in the mountains. The king stamped his foot. "And how is it this person has never given me one of her quilts as a gift?" he demanded. "She only makes them for the poor, your majesty," the soldier replied, "and she will not sell them for any amount of money." "Well, we shall see about that," the king roared. "Bring me a horse and 1,000 soldiers," and they set off in search of the quilt maker. But when they arrived at her house, the quilt maker merely laughed. "My quilts are for the poor and needy, and I can easily see that you are neither of those." "I want one of those quilts," the king demanded. "It might be the one thing that will finally make me happy." Do you think that quilt would be the thing to make him happy? It's pretty beautiful, her quilts. The woman thought for a moment. "Make presents of everything you own, and then I'll make a quilt for you. With each gift that you give, I will sew in another piece. When at last all of your things are gone, your quilt will be finished." "Give away all my wonderful treasures?" cried the king. "I don't give things away, I take them." And with that, he ordered his soldiers to seize the beautiful star quilt from the quilt maker. But when they rushed upon her, she tossed the quilt out the window, and a great gust of wind carried it up and away. Well, he tries to steal it because she tells him the only way he can get one is if he gives everything he owns away. And for everything he gives, she will put another piece of fabric on. I don't think he likes that. The king was now very angry. He marched the woman down through the town and up another mountain, where he had his royal iron maker shape a thick bracelet of iron. Then they chained her to a rock in the cave of a sleeping bear. Once more the king asked her for a quilt, but once more she refused. "Very well then," the king replied, "I'll leave you here, and when the bear awakens, I'm sure he will make a very fine breakfast of you." Ooh, he's a very violent king as well. So this poor old woman who's done nothing but make quilts and give them away is now chained in a cave with a sleeping bear. Later, when the bear's eyes opened and he saw the woman in his cave, he stood on his mighty hind legs and gave a roar that rattled her bones. She looked up at him and sadly shook her head. "It's no wonder you're so grouchy," the quilt maker said. "You've nothing but rocks on which to rest your head at night. Bring me an armful of pine needles, and with my shawl I shall make you a pillow." And that is what she did. No one had ever been so kind to the bear before. So he broke the iron bracelet and asked her to spend the night. Aw, so he was mean and ferocious and grouchy, but she gave him a gift. And when she did that, he broke her chains and became much kinder. Now, although the king was very good at being greedy, he was very bad at being mean. All that night he couldn't sleep because he was thinking about the poor woman in the cave. Oh my, what have I done? He wailed. So he woke up his soldiers, and they all marched in their pajamas up to the cave to save her. But when they arrived, the king found the quiltmaker and the bear having a breakfast of berries and honey. Well, it's good to know that the king has a conscience. A conscience is that part of you that tells you if you've done something right or something wrong. And his conscience kept him up at night, so he went to rescue her. He realized what he did was wrong. Sometimes we do that when we're angry. And he tries to make up for it, but they're already out there having a great time. Now the king completely forgot about feeling sorry, and he became angry all over again. He ordered the royal island makers to build an island. Didn't know you could do that. Barely big enough for the woman to stand on her tiptoes. Once again, the king asked for her quilt. Once again, she said no. Very well, the king replied. Tonight, when you're too tired to stand and lie down to sleep, you will drown. And the king left her alone on that tiny island. Shortly after he left, the quiltmaker saw a sparrow flying across the great lake. A cold, fierce wind was blowing, and it did not look like that poor bird would make it to shore. The quiltmaker called to him, and he stopped to rest on her shoulder. The poor, tired sparrow was shivering, so the woman quickly made him a coat from her scraps of her purple vest. When he was warmed and the wind had stopped, the bird flew off, but he was very grateful to the quiltmaker for what she had done. Soon the sky darkened, the air filled with a huge cloud of sparrows, thousands of wings beating together as they swooped down, lifted the woman up, and carried her safely to shore. So once again, her act of kindness, her act of giving a little vest, little coat to a tiny sparrow, has come back to her in the form of another act of kindness. That's what kindness does. You do one thing for someone, they generally will do something for you or for someone else. And now she has been rescued from that teeny tiny island. Again that night, the king could not sleep for thinking about the woman alone on the island. Oh my, what have I done? He moaned. So he woke up his sleepy soldiers again, and they marched in their pajamas down to the lake to set the woman free. But when they arrived, she was sitting on a tree limb, sewing tiny purple coats for all of the sparrows. I give up, the king shouted. What must I do for you to give me a quilt? Well, we already know the answer to that, don't we? Because she told him what you have to do to get a quilt is give away all of your things. He just didn't like the answer. As I said, the woman answered, give away all of your things and I will sew a quilt for you. And with each gift you give, I'll add another piece to your quilt. I can't do that, cried the king. I love all my wonderful, beautiful things. But they don't make you happy, the woman replied. Then what good are they? That's true, the king sighed. And he thought about what she said for a long, long time, so long that weeks went by. Oh, all right, he finally muttered. If I must give away my treasures, I must. Well, so he's really taking to heart what she said, and she pointed out, even though you have all this stuff, it's not making you happy. And so he's decided to give them away. I wonder if he'll actually do it. The king went to the castle and searched from top to bottom for something that he could bear to give away. Frowning, he finally came upon a single marble. But the boy who received it smiled so brightly in return that the king went back for more things. Eventually, he brought out a pile of velvet coats and went about the town giving them to people who were dressed only in rags. And they were all so pleased, they marched up and down the street in a grand parade. Well, still, the king did not smile. So he tries to give away just one tiny thing and see how it goes. And the little boy was actually really happy to get that marble. So then he gives away all these coats to people who don't have any, and they're quite happy, but he's still not very happy. Next, the king fetched 100 waltzing blue Siamese cats and the dozen fish that were clear as glass. Wow. It's quite the wild gift there. Blue cats and clear glass fish. Then the king ordered his merry-go-round with the real horses to be brought out. Children cried with delight and cartwheeled around him. And just the smallest of smiles began to show on the king's face. So he brings out a merry-go-round for the town. And when he sees the children really enjoying that, he does smile a little. The king looked about him and saw the dancing and merrymaking and all the happiness his gifts were bringing. A child took hold of his hand and pulled him into the dance. Now the king really smiled and even laughed out loud. "How can this be?" he cried. "How can I feel so happy about giving my things away? Bring everything out. Bring it out at once." Meanwhile, the quiltmaker kept her word and started making a special quilt for the king. With each gift he gave, she added another piece to his quilt. So he's starting to realize that when he gives things away, it's actually making him feel pretty happy. So the king kept on giving and giving. When at last there was no one left in the town who had not received something, the king decided to go out into the world and find others who might be in need of his gifts. But before he left, the king promised the quiltmaker he would send a sparrow to her each and every time he gave something away. Morning, noon, and night, the wagons rolled out of town, piled high with the king's wonderful things. And for years and years, messengers, sparrows flew to the quiltmaker's windowsill, and the king slowly emptied his wagon, trading his treasures for smiles around the world. That'll let you know how many things he had if it's taking him years and years to give it all away. But he's keeping up to his end of the bargain. This is just a picture of him kind of going, there's no words on this page. There's just pictures of him going to all these different places to give away his things all over the world for years. On and on the quiltmaker worked, and piece by piece the king's quilt grew more and more beautiful. Finally, one day, a weary sparrow flew into her window and perched on her needle. She knew then and there it was the last messenger, and she put a final stitch in the quilt and started down the mountain in search of the king. So at long last, he has given everything away. And you can look and see she's making the quilt. She has made this quilt for years, and so it's quite detailed and quite beautiful. I love quilts. I think they're pretty, even when they're not special ones like this. After a long search, she finally found him. The king's royal clothes were now in tatters, his toes poked out of his boots, yet his eyes glittered with joy, and his laugh was wonderful and thunderous. The quiltmaker unfolded the king's quilt from her bag. It was so beautiful that hummingbirds and butterflies fluttered about. Standing on tiptoe, she tenderly wrapped it around him. "Why, what's this?" cried the king. "As I promised you long ago," the woman said, "when the day came that you yourself were poor and had given all your things away, only then would I make you a quilt." The king's great sunny laugh made green apples and flowers. Green apples fall and flowers turn his way. "But I am not poor," he said. "I may look poor, but in truth my heart is full to bursting, filled with memories of all the happinesses I have given and received. I'm the richest man I know." Nevertheless, the quiltmaker said, I made the quilt just for you. So he had gotten so used to giving things away and that being part of his life that he didn't even remember that he had asked for the quilt. And now here it is being wrapped around him. Thank you, replied the king. I'll take it, but only if you'll accept a gift from me. There is one last treasure I have left to give away. All these years I've saved it just for you. And from his rickety rundown wagon, the king brought out his throne. It's really quite comfortable, the king said, and just the thing for long days of sewing. From that day on, the king often came to the quiltmaker's house in the clouds. By day, the quiltmaker sewed the beautiful quilts she would not sell, and at night the king took them down to the town. And then he searched for the poor and downhearted, never happier than when he was giving something away. So now he's giving away the beautiful quilts that the quiltmaker makes to people who are in need. And that's the end. That's where the story ends. Very happy ending. This is a wonderful story of how important it is to give and not always worry about getting things. I think around this time of year, we get so anxious to be able to get just the right gift. We want to have something waiting under the tree that's just perfect for us in the morning. And we don't realize that things really don't bring happiness. You can enjoy them, and that's nice, but true happiness comes from when we help others and we give and we spread kindness and helping and happiness throughout the world, just like in this wonderful book. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you all have a wonderful winter break. We're going to miss you, of course, but we'll be happy to see you back at school on January 6th, ready for a wonderful year. In the meantime, we have one more week of school, and I hope you'll practice giving and see how that makes you feel inside. Because I guarantee you, if you are giving of kindness and small acts of helping, that you will start to feel happy just like the king did. All right, hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here next year.